Good morning. It is, I almost said Friday morning. It's definitely not Friday morning. So I'm sorry if you tuned in thinking it was. It's going to be a real rough morning for you. It is Monday morning, July 29th here in the city of Noblesville. I'm Mayor Chris Jensen, and I am here on another edition of Mental Health Monday, where we're going to spend the next half an hour talking about all things mental health, but diving in more specifically about back to school mental health. Now, you may be tuning in and being like, back to school, it's only July. Well, here in Noblesville, we have the pleasure of going back to school on Wednesday, July 31st. So it's incredibly topical. Happens to be Kristen Boice, my 40th birthday on Wednesday as well. Happy birthday to me. I said the best blessing is those four little sweet faces going right out the house into somebody else's business for a couple hours. So it's gonna be a great day. Yes, I am joined once again by my good friend, licensed therapist here and owners of Pathway to Healing Counseling, Kristen Boice. Good morning, Kristen.
Good morning. I'm so excited to be here with our special guest today.
You want to tee up who our special guest is?
Craig Spinner is going to be joining us. He's a counselor at Noblesville High School. And Craig and I go way back. Rachel Hall introduced us. So that's how Rachel is a therapist at Pathways and went to college with Craig. So we go back.
Small world, Rachel Hall was my boss at Butler University when I was a student at Butler University. And Craig Spinner used to be at Westfield with my mom, Elaine Jensen. So pretty much we're all connected here today in a very Noblesville way.
Yes. And Craig hosted a podcast at Westfield and Noblesville. So I was a guest on his podcast at Noblesville. So we're excited to have him to help us talk about all things transitioning back to school and tips and helpful strategies. So welcome, Craig, to the Mental Health Monday today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're excited about this conversation. I know I kind of jokingly said I'm excited for Wednesday. I know not every parent is excited for Wednesday, and that's what we're going to address. Not everyone's in my seat. I also know there's a lot of kids that may be faced with some anxieties this week thinking about going back to school. I was talking last night with a neighbor who's a sixth grader, and sixth graders, man, they are focused on that locker combination. So he was practicing last night, and so I know there is a lot of anxiety and angst around this topic, whether you're transitioning to a new school, whether you're going to kindergarten for the first time, whatever it may be. We're going to talk about all those things here today. And of course, if you are tuning in live, we know we have a lot of folks watching live. We have a lot of folks that watch later. Feel free to answer, if you have any questions, put them in the chat. If you want to say hi, if you don't like Mr. Spinner, let him know there. I'm just kidding. Feel free to comment on any of that stuff. Just teasing, but feel free to use the chat to your discretion at any point in time. We'll try to address that as we go along or get back to you later at some point in time. But before we do any of this, a good exercise is square breathing that Kristen Boice is going to lead us through. I'm sure that's important not only this morning, but I bet she'll tell you to address that anytime you're feeling anxiety about going back to school. So, Kristen, you want to lead us through that exercise?
Yes. So transitions can create a lot of uncertainty, which then creates anxiety. This is the number one strategy I want to teach you today for parents, grandparents, kids, teachers, administrators. If we can do this collectively, we're going to help students make this transition a lot more, I would say, easier and smoother. So we're going to inhale. The key is to feel your feet on the floor. So this is a centering exercise. We're going to breathe and inhale through our nose for 8. So you're going to inhale for 4. You're going to hold the breath. This is really key when I work with clients, is holding the breath and then a slow exhale out your mouth like you're cooling soup or cooling down a cookie. So we're going to do 2 breaths together. So feet on the floor, kind of get situated in your chair. Or if you're standing, this is effective just the same. So we're going to take a big, deep inhale through your nose, hold, and a slow release out your mouth. You want that exhale to be longer even than the inhale to get the full benefit, to access the parasympathetic nervous system. That's the calming side to the body and the brain. So let's do one more big, deep inhale through your nose. And we're going to let it all go out our mouths. I could just feel my shoulders drop, could feel more relaxed in my body. And I recommend 5 to 6 breaths every hour. So use your Apple Watch. If you have one of those, set a timer on your phone so your body can automatically go to the breath and just really recenter yourself for the day.
I would say I use this throughout the day, especially as I'm driving through downtown Noblesville traffic. So feel free to use that at any point in time throughout your day. So, all right, Kristen, well, I'm gonna tee it off to you and Craig because you guys I love having a guest because I get to just sit back and monitor the situation, which is wonderful. So, why don't you guys start a discussion kind of about what people are facing this week and what that may look like? It's going to look differently for everybody, and then obviously some coping strategies as we go into this school year.
So Craig, why don't you tee it off with what are your top 5 most helpful strategies in making a transition back to school for students?
Oh, wow.
What would you?
Well, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have 8. Can I do my top 8?
Perfect. Let's do top 8. That's
Well, a
great.
couple of them are similar. In no specific order. I think one of the biggest things it was a second on my list, but I think I'm going to bump it up to first is sleep. And establish, and they all kind of run together, but like I had sleep and routine at the top of my list. You got a hold of me last night. So I was like, when I was falling asleep, I'm like, I got to remember to make a list tomorrow and be organized. And, I think that gets, I think there are, especially for young, well, I think for all ages, I work with high schoolers, and prior to Noblesville, I worked 18 years with middle schoolers. And so my whole career has been in the secondary, but I'm a parent. So, I've had little ones. And so I think it doesn't matter what age your children are, getting back into that, it's still light out for a long period of time. So maybe something in that piece would be go buy some blackout shades or something to help this season. But in all seriousness, I loved hearing you talk about the parasympathetic, that rest and digest piece we talk about that in our offices here at the high school. But sleep is the number one place where our minds and our bodies can rejuvenate without diving into all the science of it. So maybe with this week, start backing off the playtime for your younger ones and encouraging your older ones to the best of your ability, if they'll still listen to you, to start getting in a better habit of sleep, because that morning bus or that alarm clock will be here before you know it.
Yeah, I was going to say that's probably one of the things that I think a lot of parents are probably somewhat anxious about, is the fact that I know I had 1 3-year-old in between me last night, and I had one on the couch watching a movie at 10:30 last night. So trying to get adjusted Wednesday morning is going to come quickly. So I imagine there's a lot of folks that are trying to break some summertime habits and get folks back into a routine.
Yeah, for sure. And that was the second thing, is finding some kind of routine and maybe practicing that with the short time you have left, especially with the younger ones. The secondary students, sometimes we feel like they're not going to necessarily listen to us, or they need to figure that piece out on their own. Just you saying it as a parent and encouraging it, you're in the ballpark. And I know that might feel redundant, but we see a lot of that, with students coming in, and it's no criticism to parents by any means. It's a challenge. So just keep saying the right things and encouraging that routine. But I think equally at the top, I don't know if this is 2 or 3, but finding some kind of cell phone hygiene is massive. I think we could have a whole week-long podcast on the use of cell phones, but to the best of your ability as a parent, is finding ways to encourage, force, mandate, whatever you can to back that off and limit that screen time, because makes a massive difference.
No screen rooms. This is one of our rules at our home. We do not have phones in our rooms at night.
Yeah,
so we all the central kitchen, so nobody's tempted to get on their phone at night. We put them all we put the kids all put their phones out of the room at night.
Massive. I think it's a public health crisis, to be honest with you. And, without, that'd be the only, platform I get on, but it's a massive problem. I started reading The Anxious Generation this summer. And that really it's all stuff I think I probably knew as a lifelong educator, but it really puts the why behind the buy for me. So I think that'd be worth, especially if you are a parent soon to be parent, or you're a parent of very little ones in elementary, and but even up to high school, and my kids are in college now, and it's equally as helpful for me to read that and then pass along all the stuff I barked at them about, and to have the science behind it. But the anxious generation, it's a huge pickup. So I'd throw that in there. Yeah, and then I would say self-care. Like, I had no idea you were going to start with square breathing, but that's something we emphasize here in our office constantly, is establishing some kind of self-care as an adult, and so that you model that for your student, no matter what their age. Talk about it, model it, do it together, whatever is comfortable or appropriate in your household. But I think that kind of goes along with the other piece on my list was, adversity is okay. And I think that could be the most controversial thing I say. As first I wrote adversity is good, and then I didn't like how that sounded, and I wrote over it, adversity is okay. I think having your student use their voice could be the best piece of advice. One of them that I give, I always tell high schoolers, your voice is your superpower. And as cheesy as that might sound to them, it's true. And if that image rings in their head, then we've done them a good service. But I can't tell you the amount of times that I wish the student would learn to interact with us, even juniors and seniors. And it's not that we don't want to talk to parents. We want to talk to parents. But when it comes to schedules and all the nuts and bolts of things, it's the student who has to live here during the day. And then that can become even bigger challenge once they leave high school, whether that means college, work, military, whatever. But allowing your student to reach out to the teacher, allowing your student to reach out to their counselor, no matter what their age, and coach them on how to do that. I think that's a huge piece, so that they learn to solve problems independently. That piece I kind of tacked on after thinking about that book that I was reading, because those phones, they talk in the book about synchronous and asynchronous development. And when you're constantly allowing somebody else to speak for you, you're not learning how to manage that situation. And there's so much growth that goes with that. So
Can I just pause for a minute? Because I think that's such an important piece that you're talking about, from a psychological perspective, emotional well-being, to know they can do it. That is such for self-advocating and to have a voice. So many people come to therapy because they've lost their voice. And to be able to honor and encourage and role play. We do a lot of role play at our house. You're like, what are you guys doing? I'm like, we're going to role play this conversation because it gives them confidence. So if they're starting school and they're scared, they can say, I feel scared because I don't know how to do, I don't know where my class is, or I feel overwhelmed because I don't have anybody to sit with. They can talk to the teacher. They can talk to the counselor. They can use their voice. They can use their words. They can, that's why I love Inside Out movies, because they learn to connect. So I want to just say that is probably one of the top things. I would echo that all of the things you're saying. Yes, huge. So I'm so glad you put that in there. And at home, they have to be able to have a voice. So then they can go outside in the world and know how to use it in a healthy, centered, effective way. So thank you, Craig, for saying that.
Yeah, my pleasure. I put that at the bottom, wondering how that would come off. So I'm glad that you echoed that. It wasn't cool for my kids growing up to have their dad be their school counselor or be a school counselor once they left my school. And the answer to me was always, sorry, don't like it. Reach out to your teacher, reach out to your school counselor. And, I have one that was a little more independent about that, or willing to do that, than the other. And I would say it served them both well. It is, and it was no easier for me, but I knew that in the end that would serve them better. Again, it's not because people at school don't want to talk to parents. We definitely want to talk to parents, but believe me when I say that we love your kids. We love all kids, and we're in the business of developing them. And when we're constantly answering questions to parents about what the student has to experience during the school day, it complicates the development and the growth for the student. So we're not harming anyone, but we're definitely delaying it if we're not dealing directly with the student in certain cases. So yeah, that's pretty much everything I had. The only other thing on my list was getting involved. And it doesn't, despite the age, you know, at the younger ages, that obviously looks different, but doing things outside of school and getting involved in things, and meaning extracurriculars, and if sports or music or theater or things that, at least at the high school, like we have a club for just about anything you can think of. And if there isn't something that a high schooler wants, they can create their own as long as they go through the right steps. But even at the younger ages is encouraging getting your student, your child involved in things aside from a screen and aside from something inside the school hours, just to learn those soft skills, learn how to get along with people for all the right reasons. So
yeah, I was going to comment on that actually, because I had this conversation. I actually have an intern in college sitting in my office right now. I should remain nameless. We were actually just discussing this. She's going to be a sophomore at IU, Noblesville High School grad, and was talking about how her first semester at IU was a little bit challenging. It was a little culture shock, right? I mean, you're walking into a big city, you'd see somebody who, oh, that person seems nice, and you never see them again. And so she rushed to sorority and is going to be living in a sorority. And we kind of talked about how that kind of shrinks your social network a little bit. And it's very similar, I'd imagine, at Noblesville High School, you know, a larger school in the state of Indiana, trying to find that niche so you can make that social circle a little bit smaller to make those personal connections, and how important that is. So that was a very topical discussion we just had a few minutes ago.
Yeah, I would also add to parents, know that I would assume if you're tuning in, you're a supporter, I would hope, but just know that we care about your kids, and sometimes the answer isn't yes. And it isn't because we don't care, but just know that we love what we do, or we wouldn't be here. I think just come in with an open mind, and yeah, use your voice.
Let's talk about belonging, because I think there's an epidemic of kids feeling like they don't want to put themselves out there because they're afraid, no matter what age it is. I've seen it all the way through the developmental cycle, including adults. We all we are afraid to put ourselves out there because we're afraid of being judged, rejected, criticized, abandoned, that we're not going to belong in a group. We're going to be rejected. And so let's talk about the anxiety and the fear of making new friends, right? Because they're like, oh, I'm that shame of no one's going to like me. I'm not athletic enough, pretty enough, handsome, whatever, strong enough, tall enough. I mean, we could go, the list goes on and on. So we kind of hope, there's a lot of anxiety for kids on where they're going to sit for lunch. Who are they going to sit with?
Yes.
You're going to play with. So let's talk about that. What are some of the ways that you would help a student or a kid try to work through that fear of putting themselves out there or making a new friend?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. And I wish there was I guess if there was an easy way, you wouldn't ask the question, right? Because it's a perpetual developmental issue. And I'm glad you mentioned that in adults, because we all feel that, right? Just because we're older doesn't mean we shed those those kind of inner child pieces that we still have in us. At my level, in the high school setting, and I'll speak from my 18 years of middle school experience too. Once you get to the secondary level, kind of lunch becomes, there's no recess, right? Or midday, or whatever term you have for that break in the day where it's time to go play, for instance, in the younger grades. But in my, it really starts with the relationship, right? Because, we're bound by time in a school setting. And so it's never an easy piece. I always do I think it's something I might've learned in graduate school of all things. I don't remember where I learned it, but I always draw like a bullseye, a target. And I have students identify, if you think about the Target sign, like the store from the Target store, right? In the middle of the bullseye would be people that are near and dear to you, your bestest, closest relationships. I don't care who they are, where they are, but then list their names in there. And then I work 2 rings out. Okay, your next ring of people is, who are the people that aren't as close as them, but they're close. And then the people on the outside are, these are people you come across that you still like them, but you don't know them as well, right? And so from there, I work with, what is it about them that you like? And in the inner circle, oh, they're funny, they just like the same things I like, and pretty easy to, the further out we get, the harder sometimes it is for students you get a lot of, they're nice and they seem fun, which is all fine. But what I'm doing is I'm trying to get the student to tell me what it is they value in those relationships. And then the real work for that student to do is to say, okay, here's your homework. Can you at least try something different as you go back out of my office and you go to lunch, or I want you to do this in every class. I want you to be examining the classroom for people that you may not know and that share those similar characteristics. And I want you to write it down. I want you to say, I don't care if it's the dude in the hat or the guy in the Air Force Ones or the girl that sits up front, just describe them to me and come back tomorrow with that description. And then once we do that, then the real work begins. It's, well, what about, how do you know how did you start a relationship with your best friend? Well, we met in this class, or whatever story that is. There's always an entry point into the relationship. Okay, well, start by saying hello to them. Start by faking a question. Find a reason to start a conversation. Use your voice. And so I'll kind of park the bus there, but that's kind of I don't know, I call it the target exercise in my head, but it takes work. I think in this age of screens, I think it all goes back to screens. We want things immediately, and we're constantly comparing, and that's not how the world outside of our screens operate. But our brains get conditioned to think, well, that's how he or she is, and I'm intimidated to go talk to that person because I saw them on whatever platform it was looking this way. Well, we don't know if that's real or not. And so these things get a little more complicated than perhaps when we as parents were growing up. Did that hit the mark for you?
Really helpful. Yeah, I like that. It's conversation starters, like people don't know, and then they're scared. They're like, like you said, they've seen them on Instagram or some other platform, and they're scared to put themselves out there. How do you help students work through anxiety? Because I think as parents, the number one thing I tell parents is you can't fix, rescue, or save them from it.
Yeah.
Let them process their feelings, create a safe place to talk to you. So what would you say to students that have a lot of anxiety?
Well, the first thing I do, you're speaking my language. It's a lot of the work I like to do outside of school as well. But I first make sure they understand that nothing's wrong with them and explain the science behind what's going on in them, that we all have stress and anxiety. So identifying what that is, and that it's our body's response to adversity, and that we need it in a lot of circumstances. And so if we can understand just like when you use the word parasympathetic, that's what I'm talking about, getting them to understand. They don't have to recite what that is. And I don't care if they don't remember that, but I'll talk to them about fight, flight, freeze, and sometimes fawn, I guess, is kind of the new one. And what happens. And when you used your your screen froze, I thought maybe you were actually meditating there for a second. Like, yeah, just like that.
I'm into my
so
right now.
Yeah.
Parasympathetic state.
Yeah, that's the first step. And in younger students, parents, you can still do that. The language just changes. It's the same thing. You know, we talk about the sympathetic nervous system being the pedal of the car and the brake system being the parasympathetic, right? And so there's a bazillion ways in books and stuff you can do that. So that's number one. And then number two is the easiest thing is the first thing we do in life is breathe, and the last thing we do in life is breathe. And so why not learn to use that as your superpower? And you modeled that beautifully at the beginning, because that calms the nervous system. That's something students can do anywhere. They can use I like to think of it as focused breathing practices. You can call it meditation, you can call it whatever you want, but you can't argue with the science, right? And that the breath, focused breath, and learning to rebound from distraction, right, is how we can free of charge, don't need to log on to anything, learn to calm that down. And it can be done in any setting. You don't have to be sitting in a funny position. You don't have to be wearing special clothes. You don't have to buy a certain app. You can learn to do it. The key is it's difficult, right? And I hear students all the time say, well, it's too distracting. That's great, right? There's no if you turn the Olympics on, there's no, I know there's breakdancing now, but there's no meditation, right? And so you're not striving to get anywhere. You're simply learning to recognize and become more aware. And so I think that's one of the best things you can do to curb anxiety. Sometimes students, especially older students, it makes them more anxious, and that's okay too. You got to definitely dance that line between more anxious and trauma, right? But that's a separate topic. So that's typically, I think, where I lean into.
Can I ask a question? I know we're running out of time here, but I wanted to chime in from the parent side of things. As a parent of kids, younger kids, you guys have some older kids, but maybe some parents that might be facing some anxiety going into this week. Again, there's a whole host of reasons why you might feel that way. But you want to touch on kind of what parents can be doing to prepare themselves, because I also believe that anxiety gets passed on. I always say that the mood of my wife usually reflects the mood of our house. I'm sure I'm just as guilty the moment I say that. So you want to talk a little bit about parents and how we can deal with it?
Yeah, that's a great question too. I think just the first thing that pops into my head is just slowing down, right? We live in this beautiful county, in this beautiful area where we have access to so many wonderful things. And it's kind of, I'm guilty of this too. And it's like, go, go, go. And it's like, just hit the brakes and slow it down. And if you feel like you can't, you can. There's enough time in the day. I think that's if you are the model of that, like whether you see it or not, what our kids are, especially our younger kids, are super, super observant. They see, they feel, they hear, they mimic everything we do as parents. It doesn't matter the age. And so if you're doing that for them, it doesn't feel like they're following you. They are, and they will. So I think that's first and foremost. So whatever it is you want to see your toddler, your tween, your teen, whatever the age is, embody that yourself.
That's what I'm like, I got to breathe. Like if I can feel myself, and it's noticing your body's responses. Notice if you feel like your breath is changing, your chest is tightening, you feel the tension in your jaw. You're like, oh, sometimes I would try to talk like this. So I would try to like be calm, and they can feel that. Like just because I'm talking like this through my teeth, because they can feel that. So it's the coming back, recognizing, oop, I kind of flipped. I'm getting anxious. Here's the other piece, I think, too, is noticing your inner child. What do I mean by that? Like if, let's say you're identifying or over-identifying, they come home from school and they say, no one would sit with me, and you're like, well, I'm going to march in there and I'm going to talk to the teacher, because you want to protect the kid from feeling that feeling of, they feel rejected. They don't feel good enough. It's just being with them in the feelings. So you're noticing your own feelings. You're taking deep breaths. You're soothing it. And then just be with them. Listen, say, tell me more about that. Oh, that's so hard. Tell me more about that. Then once they process, you can start helping them with the voice and how they can handle maybe making some connections. But what we want to do is jump in there and rescue and fix it, because we don't want our kids to feel that. And what I say is just take a moment, like you said, slow it down, nurture yourself. Then you can just hold the space for your child. I think that is so key, because they're going to be nervous getting on the bus for the first time. They're going to be nervous going to high school. They're going to be nervous going to middle school, working on their locker, like you said, Mayor Jensen. Like this is all normal feelings given the transition. So let them have their feelings. It's okay. We don't have to rescue them from feeling that way. We have to sit with our own discomfort with it. And that's hard as a parent.
Well, I just got to say, Craig, Kristen, thank you so much for this discussion. Our time is actually up, but this was very timely. Jenna Stewart, thanks for your comments. You're spot on all of them there, as always. But thank you again for your giving of your time today. I really appreciate it. To everyone at Noblesville High School, Craig, good luck. We appreciate what you're doing. With all the hustle and bustle and all the chatter you hear on social media. I'm always impressed by the people I meet, not only teaching our young people, but some of those kids that come out of Noblesville High School. The future's bright, and so keep investing in them, and we really appreciate it. In the meantime, tune in another month for another Mental Health Monday. Kristen, if someone's in crisis, where do they go right now?
988. I know the high school is trying to really push this out. The school system is, because you can text or call 24 hours a day with a trained clinician on the other end. Please, please, please know you matter. You're worth it. You are here for a reason. And that shame voice wants to tell you something otherwise. 988. If you need support, please don't hesitate to call or text.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys. We'll see you back here next month for another edition of Mental Health Monday.
Thanks, Craig. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.